Hey guys, I'm gonna be doing this whole video with a blanket because it's freezing in my house. But I'm gonna be comparing "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" by Dylan Thomas and the song "When the Earth Stands Still" by Don McDonald. The really cool part of this that I kind of discovered the reason I wanted to do that piece was because there's actually a choral piece called "Do Not Go Gentle," arranged by Daniel Childs, and I'm also going to be doing like a little comparison between that arrangement that he did of this poem and this other choral song by Don McDonald. So the three things that I mostly want to talk about in regards to these poems, the first one is going to be the central theme and how that's developed, what they're trying to accomplish. And then I'm going to move on to the symbolism in the piece. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about are the different structures. And that's going to be including the music version of the poem as well. So I actually said that "Do Not" takes an extrinsic persuasive approach to telling the audience to confront death. I would say that they're almost telling them, because they're saying like "do not rage" or "rage, rage, do not go gentle." They're saying don't just let yourself die, like fight against that. Also, because of the length of the piece itself, it's almost like it's trying to continually persuade you. So it's providing more and more examples of why you should continue to fight and you shouldn't just give in. The poem also uses second person to speak directly to the audience. In "Do Not," it says, "Come bless me now with your fierce tears." So it's using with your fierce tears. So moving on to "When the Earth Stands Still," kind of a similar approach here. They're also talking about the confrontation of death, like I said before, but they take a different approach to do so. Instead of saying, oh, we should fight death, we can't give into that, they're more so saying, just let yourself be. It's inevitable. Just let what happens happen. They also talk to their audience in second person. They say, would you take the time to miss me when the earth stands still? So I would say that "When the Earth Stands Still" is actually using a more intrinsic approach. It's offering up several questions like, would you take the time to miss me when the earth stands still? That's used as a question mark at the end of that. And then there's a line before that that says, hold me, would you take the time to hold me and embrace the chill, which is also it's phrased with a question mark at the end of it. So it keeps offering up these rhetorical questions, and the chorus kind of proposing a self-reflection in the person who could potentially be reading it. Real quick, a little bit of evidence that "When the Earth Stands Still" is talking about just letting themselves go towards death instead of fighting it. They do say, because there's no use running because the storm's still coming. So basically just let it be. If that storm is death, in which they're talking about. So the next thing that I want to talk about is going to be the symbolism. I'm going to touch on the tone briefly and possibly some imagery. So first off, there is this contrast between using dark and light. So in "Do Not," I'm actually going to pick this line apart for a couple different reasons. There's a line that says, wise men know at their end, no dark is right. So they're saying dark, and dark symbolizes a haziness, an uncertainty, possibly an unawareness. Similarly, "When the Earth Stands Still," they also talk about darkness in a similar sense. They say, come listen in the moments of the silence before shadows fall. So shadows kind of refers to the darkness as well. Shadows actually symbolize the essence of being truly non-existent but yet still present at the same time, as if something doesn't truly disappear with your physical body and your being, because your spirit is still there. The essence of something is still there, even if it doesn't truly exist, even if it's not real, if that makes sense. They also talk about storms. There's no use running because the storm's still coming, which is also similar to a darkness theme, sort of. So storms represent tumultuous experiences, potentially the art of dying itself. So the storm's still coming, death is still approaching. Storms are wild, uncontrollable, incomprehensible. It's just a maelstrom of everything at once that nobody has any control on whatsoever. So then to quickly talk about the contrast of light. So do not go gentle into that good night. That line alternates with rage against the dying of the light. So the dying of the light is like the dying of you, the spirit, the human essence. So rage, fight against death, the death of yourself, basically. Do not go gentle does something similar actually, but they do it so quickly that it's kind of hard to pick up on it really. So at the beginning of the stanzas, they'll talk about death. So wise men at their end know the dark is right. But then it quickly switches over the course of one line to do not go gentle into that good night. So it's kind of depressing, kind of stating the facts that this is what's happening, this is what's going to happen. But then they're saying, well, maybe not if you keep fighting. So it does switch from the hopeless to hopeful tones as well. And then my last point, which I am the most excited to talk about because I get to actually play bits of these pieces. I'm going to talk about the structures of them, but first I'm going to talk about the rhyme schemes. So they have similar rhyme schemes. Do Not Go Gentle has the same rhyme scheme basically all throughout, except the very last stanza is different from the rest of them, and it actually repeats the last line as if it's emphasizing it twice. So there has been this shift between do not go gentle into that good night and rage against the dying of the light, and then the last two stanzas both say rage against the dying of the light. So it's trying to convince you even more because that's a very powerful line in itself. The rhyme scheme is basically like ABA throughout the whole thing except the last one. When the Earth Stands Still has a similar format. It has the rhyme schemes kind of shift between them because the stanzas often switch from 2 lines each to 4 lines. And I mean, it's not really a poem anyways. It was written for choir. So it was based upon the music before the rhythms and the words were written. But it has like an ABA rhyme scheme as well. I would also say that just based on how the poem is speaking, that Do Not Go Gentle for the time period, I think it was written in the mid 1900s. It almost has more of a common speaking language to it. It does have formal language in it, and it's more difficult to comprehend than The Earth Stands Still. But it uses a lot of commas, and the phrases are sometimes short in the middle to where it seems like very conversation-like somewhat. Where The Earth Stands Still is more cut. It basically has the lines, and there are no commas in the middle. It's just a phrase, another phrase, and it just continues like that, just like lyrics would usually, unless it's like a musical or something. But it's definitely not a musical, it's a choral piece. And now I'm actually going to play a little bit of both of these pieces because I think it's really interesting to see how somebody would interpret the different tone shifts of the poems themselves. So first I'm going to play a little bit of Do Not Go Gentle by Daniel Childs. And as you'll be able to see, it starts off in a minor key, but I'll explain the other part in a second. Hopefully it'll let you guys hear this actually. So as you can see, like I said, it's written in a minor piece. It sounds kind of eerie. And that's how the poem is throughout most of it as well. It does have this very negative tone going forth. But then at the very end, there's this shift in the piece itself too. So when it starts talking about his father, it gets a lot more personal in a sense. And I think the composer of this piece actually picked up on that as well, because the composer turned it from a minor song to a major key, and major keys are more positive. Yeah. So it's major now. It's positive. It's uplifting. Maybe not in the poem itself, because usually when you are talking about death of a loved one, that is a lot more difficult than if you're talking about a stranger. But it's definitely more comfortable in the sense. So, and I think that's definitely expressed in the piece as well. All right, now I'm going to play a little bit of When the Earth Stands Still, which you'll see. So as you can see, that song is a lot more consistent throughout. It is a major song written in a major key, which are more light and more happy throughout. And it stays that way throughout the piece, except when it goes to, and there's no use running because the storm's still coming, it actually switches to a minor key, because that is a more intense moment of the song. That's the main point of emphasis in the song. It's the message. They're saying, just let it be, let it happen. Don't run. Face your fears. Face whatever's coming for you, what's coming to you. So that's that song. Hope you liked the songs. I don't know. Like I said, both of them were talking about the confrontation of death, but they did it in very different ways, yet had similar mechanisms of approaching those different ways.